Welcome to the Watercolor Landscape. This will be for 6th and 7th grade. So for this project, you are going to create an original detailed watercolor landscape with a focus on value and color blending with a foreground, midground, and background. So you're going to use watercolor paint, and a landscape is something that has land in it, grass, trees. It can also have buildings, like you're going to see in the example in a second, and I'm going to show you what I mean by foreground, midground, and background. So let's look at this example here, okay? So with this one, this is the foreground, this building. There's lots of detail because it's close to us. Right here, these tracks and these cars on this incline is the middle ground, that midground, and then this building back here is the background, okay? I do not want you to use the sky as a background, even though technically, yeah, it is, but I want you to actually create another ground, which is your background here. So foreground, lots of detail because it's closest to us. Midground, a little bit less detail because it's a little bit farther away. And then the background is going to be even less detailed because it's very far away from us. This building right here actually has bricks, but I didn't even paint them, white bricks, because you couldn't see them from this distance. Okay, so whatever image you choose, it'll probably have those things already figured out for you, but just make sure you think about those as you get started. You're going to study J.M.W. Turner. He was known as the painter of light. Watercolor was his thing. He did acrylic as well, but he was known for watercolor and really capturing light. You're going to use watercolor on watercolor paper. You can use any type of watercolor, the watercolor palettes, cakes, tubes. I did this piece right here with just an 8-pack of Crayola watercolor that you get from Walmart for like $1. So it doesn't really matter what paint you have. You can mix any paint and colors that you want to. And it's just really about how you use the paint, not really the paint that you have. Suggestions: you can add a building or a structure to your landscape to add some interest. It may be a little bit trickier, so think about kind of where you are painting, but it would be really fun. And layers are the key to success. If you look at this painting again, especially in the light areas, you have to build them up slowly. If you're thinking right now, I did watercolor before and it turned out terrible, it's probably because you didn't add layers and you just tried to paint with a face value color. So for example, this blue back here, there's probably like 5 layers in this blue. So I took water and added a little bit of blue to water it down and make it lighter. I did a light layer, let it dry, a light layer, let it dry, to build the layers up slowly. Like in these areas, in this little roof right here, there's probably 10 layers. So you have to start with what's underneath it and then build out. You add black completely last. So under this black, there's blue. Under this black, there's blue and gray. And it really helps it make it look more realistic when you do things like that. Again, all these areas, I probably have at least 10 layers. So what happens when people kind of start out and they don't know what they're doing is they might just take this blue and paint it blue and then it's done. But it's flat. So when you want to make it look more realistic, you need to add more layers. And that's something that you're going to learn about in this project. So your rubrics here. This is a little image that I wanted to show you so you could learn about the different types of brushes. Now, depending on what you have available is fine. You don't need all of these brushes, but we're going to be talking a lot about these flat brushes and this round brush. You might have some liner brushes. These are great for details. The round brush is good for details as well, and bigger areas of detail. The flat brush is really good for the background, big areas. Do not do lines with this. I know it looks like it would be good for it, but it's not. These are good for lines and details, okay? If you have the other brushes, great. You probably just have these though, and that's perfectly fine. All right, so this is a breakdown of what you'll do each class. Class 1, you're going to brainstorm and do your sketches. You're going to watch this video, brainstorm ideas. It would help you to in your Google search to search for watercolor landscape. I don't want you to copy it, but it's going to help you get an idea of some things that would work really well with watercolor. So I think that will work for you. So come up with one idea, make sure you save it to your computer, not just bookmark the page. And then you're going to do your 2 sketches where you just have that one idea of what you're going to do and then 2 sketches, or maybe you zoom in, you zoom out, you move trees around, whatever you're going to do just so they're different. Class 2, you're going to learn about watercolor. So I have 2 videos that I added here about, these are 5 watercolor mistakes and these are 5 more watercolor mistakes. So it's important to learn about what not to do so that you can try to avoid making those mistakes. I will tell you, you're probably going to make at least one of these mistakes, if not more, but it's going to show you, you'll be like, okay, that's what I did. You know what happened and then how to fix it. So we like to go over these first to help. So in your sketchbook, if you'll write down watercolor mistakes to avoid on this day, and then as the videos are playing, you're just going to go ahead and jot those down as something that's going to go into your memory as things, hey, I need to remember this. In these 2 videos, it talks about what brush to use where, and things like that, so it'd be really helpful. The second half of class, in your sketchbook, you're going to create a sphere and value scale using watercolor. Yes, your sketchbook probably does not have watercolor paper, but it's still a good place to practice. You can also just do it on regular computer paper. It doesn't work as well, but you'll get the idea. And there's a video here to help you with that as well. It shows you how to do a value scale and how to do a sphere with a shadow. If you do it the first time and it looks terrible, do it again. No big deal, right? It's probably not going to look great the first time you do it, especially the sphere. Remember, you have to leave an area that's light to show the highlight. All right, so again, today you're going to watch these 2 videos, do your sphere and value scale, and then make sure you have these written in your sketchbook because they're really going to help you when you make one of those mistakes. Say, okay, I should have done this, or this is how I can fix it. Class 3, you're going to map out your final piece. So on watercolor paper, you're going to lightly sketch out your landscape, okay, of what you're going to do. You want to think about watercolor paper essentially as a thick paper towel. So you want to try to be as gentle with it as you can. If you are really erasing hard with it or drawing hard with it, it's going to tear the paper. So you really have to be careful. Draw as lightly as you can, erase as gently as you can. And when you're finished, make sure you have someone else check it. It's easier to finish things today than another time, okay? Some tips. What I would do is draw it really big on like a full page of your sketchbook paper, the same size as your watercolor paper is going to be, and then you can just trace it. Like you're tracing your own drawing, not someone else's, but you're tracing your own drawing onto the watercolor paper. You can use a light table if you have one, or you can simply use a window. I'm thinking about the different schools and where you are. You could even, depending on the time of the day, you could just run down to the cafeteria if there's lots of windows in there, if you don't have them in your classroom, and just place your sketchbook paper and then your watercolor paper on top of it and then just trace it out. It doesn't have to be everything, but just enough to give you the placement. Then you can kind of touch it back up in class. But that's going to be really, really helpful. So hopefully you'll get that done and have time for this. If not, you can always do this another class period. But I find that painting something together as a class is really going to help you. And you can just do this in your sketchbook. But what you'll do is your teacher will play this video and then just do a part and then pause, and you'll do that part in your sketchbook, and then the teacher will play part of the video and then you'll do part of it. So the tree may look terrible the first time, and that's okay. This is you learning and you using your sketchbook to practice and make your mistakes bigger. All right, class 4 is going to be your underpainting. So you have it mapped out, and now you're going to start with the actual watercolor. And I know this is scary, but remember in the beginning I talked about layering, okay? You're going to want to use a big brush for washes. You want lots of water and just a little bit of paint. And usually I do that in the tray. So I take water and just put it right in the lid of the watercolor palette. And then I just take a touch of the blue or whatever color it is from the actual watercolor palette, and then I just dip it into that little bit of water, and you create these really nice light layers. So here's an example to show you. So with this piece, I decided to do the background of those trees, the midground is the water, and the foreground is going to be my dog and this land area right here. So what I did, notice I just sketched out the trees, no leaves or anything like that. And then I just washed, I did an underpainting, a watercolor wash, lots of water, a little bit of paint of green, a little bit of blue, a little bit of blue here, a little bit of brown, and I haven't even touched the dog yet. Okay, that's called underpainting. Is it going to look like this when it's done? Absolutely not, but you have to do this to build it up slowly. Here's another example of underpainting. So here I have a boat in the water. Notice everything's just way lighter than it would be when it's finished, right? So you want lots of water and a little bit of paint on your brush. If you start with details now, it's going to be crazy to try to get between things like that when you're trying to do your background. So background first and just very light. Okay. Also, I would watch this video in the beginning of class. It kind of shows you the process from start to finish in time lapse. It's only a couple minutes long, but it'll give you an idea of why you need to do underpainting. It's really helpful. All right, class 5, you're going to be adding layers. So watch this video again. It's just a time lapse. It's going to help you see it from start to finish. And here's an example of me just adding some more layers. So you can see here, they're still not the exact value they should be, but I've just added more green, more blue. You add a layer, let it dry, add a layer, let it dry, add a layer, let it dry, okay, and work your way around. If the green's wet and I do the blue right next to it wet, they'll bleed together. So you have to make sure that, like, I did the green, and then I did the brown, and then I did the sky, and then I did the water. So kind of jump around a little bit and as it's drying. Class 6, you're going to add details and more layers, okay? So you can see here that I'm adding more, and I'm starting to get some big details in. So I'm starting to get some of the trees and things like that, and started to add a little bit on the dog, okay? So you're just going to keep adding layers and big details, all right? Not big details. And you can see some more examples here of some things that will help. Class 7, you do your self-evaluation. Your teacher will talk to you about these things that will be expected. Remember, it's not due today, but this is just to help you see where you are and what you can do to improve the quality of your work. Class 8 and beyond, you're going to keep painting until you get done and you love your piece, okay? When you get done, make sure you sign it with a fine point Sharpie in the bottom right-hand corner with the year, and then turn it in. So again, here's the visual process so you can kind of see it. We're here. And then you add more, and then you add more, and I'll show you the finished piece as well, which is right here. Somehow it got all the way down here, but you can see that it's right here. I'll move it whenever we get there. But this would be the finished piece after there's tons of detail and tons of layers to make it look the way you want it to. All right, so some other examples to help you. So you saw the underpainting in this one, and I just did 2 photos on this one, and then this would be the finished product, okay? But again, build the layers up slowly. I probably have like 20 layers in some sections of this boat because I had to build it up so slowly because I wanted it to look real. These are some other examples of things you can do with watercolor. You can do an eye, skin tones are possible. I did this with just those same Crayola 8 color Crayola palette, and I just mixed the colors in the lid of my palette, not in the colors, but in the lid. There's a girl, and you guys can click through these and you can kind of see. There's one of our dogs. Here's a watercolor wash with pen on top of it. Here's a good example of a landscape that's being started that wasn't finished. You can kind of see it in the process of layering. This was a self-portrait that I did. Again, using those same just 8 watercolor, Crayola or Praying, I can't remember which one I used, but super cheap, like $1, you can get really good results. You can also use just black and gray, with grays by adding water. These are 4 paintings that I did using that same, just black and water. That was it, of watercolor. This is an example of what not to do. You see how I painted the trees first. When I painted the trees first, I'd have to go between each tree to get that background, and there's no way I could make it look even across the back. So you want to paint those and then paint the trees on top, because this brown paint is going to go over that paint as long as you keep it light enough in the background. Here's an example of a house. So you can kind of see how you can get really good detail with watercolor. And then the one I showed you, this is a good example of watercolor and adding, I think I counted 20 layers in these noses to keep them light. And then there's a house, something just easy. Here's some examples of foreground, midground, and background, so you can kind of see those. Here's some things on JMW Turner, so you guys can look at these as a class with your teacher. He does some really cool things with light. And then this was a really cool video that I just added in here. This would not work for this project, but it is something really fun if you wanted to do it on your own. If your teacher gives you the link, I just went along right with this video just to try it out, and it works really well. It's really fun. All right, so again, you're creating your landscape. Remember that layers are key. You're going to get to a point in the video